So a few days ago was Amazon Prime Day, and there were some pretty interesting discounted items. Now, I was in the market for some over-the-ear headphones. I've been wanting them for a while, specifically the AirPod Maxes, but I couldn't justify paying $550 for them. And since the new generation came out, which is just really, they just changed the port through USB-C. I was hoping that during this Amazon Prime Day there was going to be a big discount on the Gen 1, the first gen AirPod Maxes. And it was true, there was a bit of a discount. But when the day actually came, I started thinking about whether or not I should buy it because when it comes to like big purchases, I tend to do the same analysis that I always do. And I'm sure that many people do this, right? Most people do a pros and cons list and try to see of whether or not they should need it or just need to justify the purchase. So this got me thinking and trying to make this video because I kind of want to talk about wants versus needs because this is something that I was actually raised by, like this type of mentality of trying to justify things that you want but don't necessarily need. And that all stems back from like how my parents raised me, and from the fact that my parents didn't have a lot of money. I wouldn't necessarily say that we're dirt poor because I didn't ever go hungry, and my parents were both able-bodied and were able to work and provide what we needed. But we didn't get everything we wanted. Again, that just stems from the fact that my family didn't have a lot of money to begin with. And even if they did, I wouldn't have wanted them to give me everything I wanted because then that means I would just end up being raised spoiled. So I'm actually very happy that my parents raised me that way, even if, when I was a kid, I wasn't super thrilled when my parents would tell me no on something that I wanted. But that stuck with me, especially because my parents are very, very conservative with their money. I think to a degree that is probably not the best way of using their money. I think there's better ways of using their money, both in like investment and retirement types of way, but also and then just spending your money and things that you want. And I think that's where my parents and I disagree, and there's that discrepancy. And my more, I guess, I think it's a generational thing too. I think my newer generational, younger generational way of thinking clashes with the way I was raised and their old traditional, more conservative way of thinking about money. And because I was raised on that, I have those thoughts too. So they clash a lot. And it leads me again, once again, to the same analysis of wants versus needs, and in feeling like I need to justify every want that I want to do or purchase or spend my money on if it's something that I don't necessarily need. And I'll give an example, but just to quickly talk about the AirPod Maxes and what I ended up doing, I ended up realizing that it's not worth it. It's not worth it at 550, and it wasn't worth it I think at 394. Now, I found out through Reddit that it seems like there was a mistake on Amazon's part, that the items were listed for like 290 a couple of days ago before Prime Day. And if I would have come across that listing, I probably would have bought it. I think 290, that seems a lot more reasonable for what you're getting, especially since it's the older generation. Again, there's not really much of a difference since there wasn't much of an upgrade, but still it would technically still be considered an older generation. But at 390, I still didn't see that it was worth it. So I decided to just not get it. I still ended up getting headphones because I ended up seeing these on Amazon, these Beats, for about $160. And when I saw that, I was like, that's a pretty good deal. I did a lot of research on both headphones. I didn't really see the differences between them, the quality differences between them to justify the price gap and the price difference. So I ended up going with these, and these are perfectly fine. And I felt a lot better about myself. So I ended up compromising, because, again, of that clash that I had between my wants and my needs in my head and the analysis that I would just do internally. So now we go into where I think, or at least where I draw the line on things. I definitely think that on like material items, I don't like to spend too much money on, or at least I need to justify it a lot. An example would be the electric scooter I bought when I was in law school. That took me about a year and a half to decide on actually purchasing it because I didn't see a good justification for it until I realized that I could use it to just commute to school so I wouldn't have to drive, I wouldn't have to pay for parking, I didn't have to walk, and I didn't have to run, or I didn't have to bike and be all sweaty to go to school. And I was like, okay, you know what? I think these are enough reasons to justify this purchase. Whether or not I am right, everybody can have their own opinion on that, but at least to me, that was enough to justify the purchase. And so, something that, but if I would have asked my parents, they would have automatically said that that was a dumb purchase. You don't need it. You could just use the bike that you already have. So, again, it's that clashing ideologies that now I just have in my head with everything I do. There's a couple of categories of things where I don't mind spending money on, like technology for the most part. But even then, like I said, if it's a pretty big purchase like the electric scooter, because technically that is tech, I still have to really justify it in my head. And I don't necessarily think that this is a unique um, way of thinking. I definitely don't. Obviously, a lot of people think about these things because they don't want to spend their hard earned money just willy nilly without having a good justification for it. But I also think that there has to be a healthy balance. And now I'm going to get into the experience that just happened not so long ago with my parents where I think it shows the biggest difference between the way I think and the way they think. So this month, October, is my birthday month, and I'm turning 25. And something that I wanted to do for my birthday is to go to Universal Studios to do horror night. I've already been like once or twice, I think, and I've had a lot of fun. The one thing I absolutely hated about horror nights was the long lines. I couldn't go through all the houses either in either day that I've been to, because the lines are just too long. So I noticed that there was essentially like a fast pass, something that would just help you skip the line for the houses. But the ticket for that was a lot more and a decent amount more. I think the sole ticket to enter the park was about $117, but to go and get that like express pass, I don't really remember what it was called, was roughly 370, I think. It was over $300. So there's a big gap. And I brought this up to my parents because I wanted to take my sister to go with me. And now I could technically pay for her ticket as well, but I was just trying to see if they wanted to either go with me or pay her own ticket. And I was ready to just say, like, hey, I was ready for them to say no, that they weren't going to pay for my sister's ticket, and that I was just going to offer to pay for the ticket. But what I wasn't expecting is for them to start shitting on me for going because they didn't think it was a good purchase. It was a good way of spending my money. And they gave me a whole talk about, am I saving my money correctly? Am I just misspending it? They gave me a whole talk about me and my finances and whether or not I am doing what I need to be doing with my money. And they saw no need and no necessity in going to horror nights and spending so much on a ticket. Now, objectively speaking, I agree with them. When I thought about potentially buying the ticket, that came through my head too. That's ridiculous. $300 for a single ticket for what 6 8 hours of fun potentially. Um, Seems like a lot when you compare it that $300 can buy you a lot of groceries. Well, maybe in this economy not anymore, but at least for me and my family, or at least me and my fiance, $300 goes a long way for food, for gas, for utilities. It does a lot, so it makes sense. And if I do end up going with my fiance and potentially my sister, it adds up quickly. 300 plus 300 plus 300, you're talking about 900, potentially plus, over $1,000. That's not counting food, maybe stay. If I don't end up just crashing with my brother in LA, like it just adds up so much more. Plane tickets if I end up flying, but likely I would have just ended up driving. So they gave me all that talk, something that I already did in my head. Like I thought about all these things. It didn't help that they just basically told me everything I already knew, and it made me feel like I just shouldn't go. I shouldn't spend the money because it didn't make any sense to do it. But in that moment, in the heat of the moment, I kind of pushed back because I straight up told them, like, what's the point of me working then if I'm not going to be able to spend the money in things that I want to spend on? I feel like I am saving the right amount of money. I think I am investing in what I need to do, and I'm thinking about the future, and I do have a saved amount in case of emergencies. So what's the problem if I want to spend some money for the convenience of not having to do the lines and wait in line and actually be able to get through all the houses? I didn't see it as a problem. At the end of the day, it is my money, and I see that this is worth it. And if I can afford it, why not? They obviously did not agree with that way of thinking because, again, they just see numbers and then they just try to be as objective as possible. They don't see the subjectiveness of it. And I think that that is wrong because at the end of the day, that's just going to limit them on things that they can do. Something that I talk about with my dad a lot is that I feel like he should travel more. He should have traveled more. But he just kept saving money. And I will always be grateful for all the things that he was able to provide for us. But I don't want to see my parents get old without spending the money that they do have on things that they do want. Now, I know that they're worried about the future and their retirement, and I agree with them 100%. You should obviously prioritize that. And if you're not in the means to do what you need, other things, extracurriculars, then that makes sense. But in my parents' case, it's not necessarily that they have the money to just go out and spend it on everything they want to do, but every once in a while, they definitely should treat themselves. And I try to treat them as much as I can. And again, clash of ideologies. I don't think I'm necessarily right. I don't think they're necessarily right. I think everybody has their own preference. Everybody lives their own lives. But it is something that I think it's very important to talk about, think about. Obviously, you shouldn't be spending money just like that without doing some sort of pro and cons list. But also enjoy your life because, our time on this world is pretty much just borrowed time. We don't know when our last day is going to be, and what was the point of saving all that money if you ended up not spending it or doing anything you wanted to do or experience any of the things that you wanted to do. I, that's something that is always recurring in my head as well, and I just don't want to live life with regrets. So I actually don't have an answer of whether or not I'm going to go to Universal Studios, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I do have things coming up. I have a wedding to plan. I have loans to pay off. So in this particular scenario, my parents might be right on this. That I should probably save that money and spend it elsewhere. But who knows? I have no idea if here in a week I end up just changing my mind and going. But I don't know. I have no idea why I wanted to talk about this. I just kind of did. Wants and needs. It's an interesting conversation. Interesting way of thinking. And we don't know, or at least I don't know what what's the right way of living. Right? I think the answer is just balance. I think the answer to like almost everything is just to have balance. And I try to live life in a balanced way. So we shall see. Maybe I'll make a video that I went to Universal Studios. Who knows? Anyways, I just wanted to rant. That's all I have. Bye.